The entrepreneurial and executive life can be a roller coaster that is filled with highs that are indescribable, but also, and unfortunately, lows that you wouldn't even wish upon your greatest enemy. Now, workplace related stress has skyrocketed in recent years, and none have been affected as those who are in the driving seat of the business. Founders, CEOs, they spend an average of 62 and a half hours per week at work. And this doesn't even include putting out fires, personal life, responding to urgent emails, and handling requests outside of the office hours. As a consequence of such high demand, the stress and demands can accelerate your rate of aging and can lower the quality of your health. In today's video and in this podcast, I'm going to share the 8 biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs and executives make with their health. Welcome to Executive Health and Life. I'm your host, Julian Hayes II, and this is the place where we help you look, you feel, and you stay at the top of your game with precision so you can enjoy the finer things in life. Now, however that looks to you. This is your first time here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Go ahead, and if you're watching this video, go ahead and subscribe and like. If you are listening to this video, go ahead and share and let someone know about it, and also subscribe. So the entrepreneurial and executive life, as I said, could be a very vicious cycle of chronic stress. And when you leave this unmanaged, this leads to a suppressed immune system, which can then lead to a higher incidences of colds, of illnesses, sleep difficulties, weight gain, low energy, lack of inspiration. So therefore, it's more difficult to come up with new ideas, to be innovative. You have demotivation, you have a loss of libido, you have a lack of desire for human connection, amongst the many, many, many other physiological effects that happens here. Excuse me. Now, with this said, before we get into each of these 8 points, basic things like sleep and, eat healthy or find accountability and those kind of things. Those are things are a given. I think we know these enough, and those things have been hashed out enough. So each of these points today are about optimizing your output, maximizing your time, being much more precise with it, being efficient and effective, and most importantly, extending health span and lifespan. So without further ado, let's dive into these 8 points here. So the very first one that I want to get into is not understanding nor knowing your unique biology. And so when we talk about Health 2.0 and we compare it to Health 1.0 that's out there, the very first thing on a fundamental level is to adopt a N of one mindset. Now, to embrace and to also understand bioindividuality, that you're compared to everyone else. You are unique to everyone else. Pardon me on that. And even if it's on a very minuscule level, you are still unique. And so what works for someone is not going to necessarily work the same way for you. And this is something that, is actually pretty applicable when we think about business as well, is that we often have to find our own path. And we can be shown a template, but we kind of have to mold that template to our liking. Now, mainstream health, it's decades behind when it comes to this N of one mentality. And when it comes to even just thinking in a systems mentality. So when I say unique biology, it's a couple of different things. And it's your genetic makeup, which of course is going to factor in epigenetics. But you also have to think about your blood makeup. You also have to think about your particular lifestyle. You also have to think about your present situation in life and your environment and many other things. Now, consider these things before jumping into just some sort of fitness plan or nutrition plan. I know there's things, it seems every few months or maybe every year or so, there's a hot wave or a trend that people fall on. So it's very easy to find yourself a part of some camp and tribe, even if it's not what's in your best interest. So when it comes to becoming your most optimal self. This is physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Having intimate knowledge of yourself on a cellular level is step one of this entire process. So let's move on to area number two. Area number two is not knowing your true age. And maybe that sounds weird, but probably by now you understand what I'm getting at here. Now, we've seen those people who they look 35. They're like, wow, this guy, this girl, man, they look really good. And then you get to talking to them and you find out they're really 55. You're like, what is going on? Now, unfortunately, we've seen those people who look 65, but they're really 40. That one stings. Now, this is all about your biological age, comparing it to your chronological age. So when you discover your biological age, this is potentially more accurate at predicting your health span. And when we say health span, think of this as how healthy you are. And then you have your lifespan. Think of this as how long you're going to live. And these are more accurate than any of the previous molecular biomarkers that are out right now. But I will say, and put an asterisk by this, that the science is still early on this. I use this on myself. I use this with clients I consult with, and it's how to practice the firm. But it's not the end all be all. Rarely are things absolute. So all this to say that this is just another tool inside the longevity toolkit. It's a very good tool, one of the first ones that you should pull out in the toolkit. But it's not the end all be all. So the real age that matters, though, is the one on a cellular level, the biology. That's the age that we should focus on, not the number of trips that you've been around the sun. And let's move on to point number 3 here. And that's not identifying or just simply ignoring red flags, potential red flags. Now, you've probably heard this. I wish I'd known this sooner. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Yeah. I'll get to it. I don't have enough time right now. There's too much work to do. We're raising a Series A or Series B right now, or it's not that bad, and it's a very tough quarter for us that we got to focus on. Now, these are just a few statements that people make. Some I've heard, and then also some of these that I've heard inside my own family. And maybe you don't enjoy getting checkups. I know a lot of men don't like those. But the thing is, or maybe you just don't. You can't stay ahead of everything, and it's just too much. There's too much going on in your life right now, or you're just so focused on your company and leading your company, and you got all these team members that you're leading as well, and you want to have a successful quarter, successful year. So I definitely get that. But the thing you're doing in all of these situations, which goes back to one of the big premises of this entire company and show, is that this is part of the success paradox. A lot of times, the more we climb up success mountain, the more we unintentionally relegate our health to the bench because we have all these other responsibilities and people that come into our lives. Now, when you have tools now that are DEXA bone scans that are easily accessible, or I should say more easily accessible than they used to be. You have full body brain MRIs. You have various different blood panels now. You have many, many other technological tools available. Preventative health and early screenings are easier now to get a hold of and much more effective. But you have to make yourself a priority first and foremost, and you have to be proactive and not reactive. When it comes to waiting for something to happen before you finally take action. Too often times with health, we wait for an issue to arise, something to show up, a symptom to flare, a bad result, or I should say a non-ideal result to show up before we actually take the action that's necessary. So let's move on to the fourth one here. That is inconsistent or incomplete blood work. Now, it's one thing to get blood work that is good, ideal, and it's another to get blood work that's optimal, blood work that's comprehensive, that really gives you a great picture of what's going on. And unfortunately, and more often than not, getting this comprehensive blood work, it only happens once a quote unquote symptom or a situation pops up. And if we're looking at the standard healthcare system right now, you have to get sick before you really get good care, or you only can get g- you only can get the tests and tools that your insurance allows. And that's unfortunate a lot of times. It's very unfortunate. And you know, another issue that comes with this, because this was a two-parter here, I talked about inconsistent and incomplete blood work, is maybe you do go get the blood work, maybe you do go get the testing, but it's just relying on the annual blood work. It's just going one time a year. For some tests, that's great. All you need is 1 year. Some tests, maybe it's every 5 years. But with just run of the mill, everyday blood work, and the way the world is now, and how stressful and how demanding your day to day life can be. And as someone whose goal is to not just be healthy, not just be average and get by, but it's to be optimized, it's to be enhanced. Taking a look under the hood, which in this case is going to be your blood and your cellular level functioning, just doing this one time a year is not enough. Taking multiple comprehensive blood work ensures, and it's going to offer up the best or the highest chance that you can catch any of these potential red flags, catch any of these potential situations or things that could impede your health, impede your longevity, and impede the quality of life that you can have. And, as I always think about this, the more data that you have, in this case, the blood work, the more that you have of this, the more precise recommendations that you can make when it comes to your health, when it comes to your nutrition. So, once again, you are going back to optimizing output because you are becoming more efficient with the time, with your recommendations. You're not guessing on anything. And all this time that you're getting back, you can pour into your business, or you can pour into your family, or whatever other activities that you enjoy. So the fifth area, speaking of data in this case, is to have, I see people with no system and they have no structure of monitoring their health. Now, I'm a guy who loves technology. I appreciate technology. I love looking at data. I do a lot of it, actually. But even if you don't love a lot of data, even if you don't love a lot of the various the health technologies available today, maybe it overwhelms you or something, having some sort of system, having some sort of strategy for monitoring, a couple of key metrics on a daily basis is beneficial. Going back to the whole annual blood work, think about this. A lot of people go to a doctor one time a year to get an annual checkup to see how everything's going. What if you could get like a mini checkup every single day of the year, and you accumulate all that data, you accumulate all that insight, and when you do go for the big checkup, you have all this data to present, which is going to lead to a much more efficient session. It's going to lead to much more efficient recommendations for the next go around. That's essentially what you're doing when you can leverage a little bit of technology, or just implement the habit of monitoring your health on a day by day basis. You're going to have all this data. You're going to know your numbers inside and out. Now, as far as metrics, just to prevent the overwhelm here, there's a few people out there who love to track everything. I had a guest recently on who tracks everything, every single thing. But then there are people out there who maybe track one or two things, and that's about it. This is highly individualistic to you, and this is highly individualistic to your particular goals. Now, I will say, though, that there are a few key biomarkers that can be predictive of your health, your well-being, your performance, and your productivity, which I think warrant a spot on your roster. And I think everyone should look at these if you ever to monitoring your. And the first one is HRV, which is heart rate variability. Another one is heart rate, sleep quality, and recovery. Sleep quality, because maybe you sleep 8 hours, but what's the breakdown of that sleep look like? What does the sleep architecture look like? And then recovery, how are you recovering from day to day, for obvious reasons? And your pulse, respiratory, and breaths per minute. And, you have all these numbers, because when you don't have nothing to reference, what you're essentially doing is you're shooting in the dark. You are operating in the dark. And once again, this leads to more emphasis where you are guessing instead of actually being, you're just testing and hoping as your strategy. And in the business world, that's nothing that you would do. So in this instance, you really do want to think of your body as a business. So run your body like a business. So area 6 is to operate with people that operate with a that's normal mentality instead of operating and asking what's optimal. Now, normal is not optimal. Now, let's really hammer that concept home here. Normal is not optimal. Now, think about, there's been a lot of cases where people have normal, and anytime I say normal for right now, I'm saying this in quotations, right? Normal results these people have, they come back, they get the blood work back, they get their data, and they have normal results. This is normal. This is normal range for you. But yet you're still not feeling well. So you leave with normal. Everything says I'm normal, but I don't feel well. I know something's off. And this is just one of many instances and situations that plays out in today's world. Now, I had a friend who was low in energy. He just felt something was off. So he went to go get some blood work, and his testosterone was low, among a few other things. But the testosterone was low, but it wasn't low enough to where it was recommended to go get some help for it, to get some boosting, some support for it, because it was still within normal range. Normal in this case is reference ranges that are based on the average healthy individual in the population study. This normal range is based on stats and isn't based on, per se, for the most part, whether this certain value, this particular value that the range is in, represents good health and optimal functioning. Now, as I'm going about this, though, not all normal ranges are lacking. So don't take me wrong here. I'm not saying the whole thing needs to be overlooked or anything. A lot of these ranges are dialed in where they need to be. And so some of these are much, much, much more beneficial than others. But there are just some, just like in the case above that I was talking about with my friend, that the markers are misleading a little bit, and that the ranges are either too high compared to what's optimal. And, when I think about ranges that are a little too high, I think about ranges when it comes to, metabolic health. And I think about ranges when it comes to glucose and fasting, insulin, and A1C. I think about what people call average and good enough in those ranges and compared to what's optimal. And it's quite the stark contrast. Now, as we look at this and we think about these ranges in general, most of the time, and ideally, these lab values should not be viewed in isolation. It's about the interpretation that your doctor is going to give you. It's about the interpretation or the health coach or the health person or whoever is helping you, the interpretation that they're going to give you. And then what you're currently exhibiting in the present time, that's also factored in. So the previous history that you have, amongst other things, all of this is going to be factored in, because once again, one of my favorite words, it's all a system and everything must be accounted, because nothing exists in a silo. And so we want to test, but we do not want to guess. So for area number 7 is to not prioritize resistance training. I love running. Running is enjoyable. Now, I've been on a week break. I just had I had a long run. And so this was a kind of a deload week for me. But I love running. It's enjoyable. Oh my God. I had a recent 22-mile run and it was enjoyable. It was enjoyable. Maybe the last mile and a half wasn't as enjoyable, but up until then, it was enjoyable. Just, oh man, the highs you get, the creativity that comes out when you run. Maybe it's just me, but I love it. Boxing, I enjoy as well. other sports as well. I don't really play them like basketball and stuff as too much anymore. But all that to say, even though I do all those activities, at the center of all those things that makes it go, that makes the engine rev, it's resistance training. Lifting weights is the most important activity. Muscle is one of our most powerful and beneficial longevity currencies by far. By far. Lifting weights. And when I say lifting weights, weights that are challenging. I'm not saying you need to go be a power lifter or max out, but the weights need to be fairly challenging for you. You need to continually challenge yourself to progress on these weights. But they're a competitive advantage, not only from a performance and productivity standpoint, but they are an advantage for numerous physiological reasons. And a couple things, and we won't go into all of them here, is that think about helping with your bone density and how typically bone density, it starts to decline after 30. And this is really important for women as this decline happens much more rapidly without any such intervention unless you do some resistance training, which will help. There's a couple other activities as well, but for the purposes here, we're discussing resistance training. And with resistance training also, you're going to help your posture. You're going to help your strength. You're going to help your mobility. You're going to also just be a overall more resilient human being. You're going to be able to withstand the stress and anything else that comes your way. A key tenet of optimal health, and this is a fundamental definition that I had to come to over the years, because at first, when I started my health journey, optimal health to me, I was running away from something. I was running away from illness. I was running away from other members of my family, trying my hardest not to have and end up in their situation. And even members of the community that I saw, I was just running away from all that thing. And that's not the most empowering feeling. And so gradually over time, that philosophy changed. And instead of running away from something, I started running towards something. And there's a key big distinction there. When you're running towards something, it's a much more empowering state. And there's many more possibilities in there. There's less fear in that state. And more importantly, when you're running towards something, that gives you more of an air of resiliency. And that's, for me, a key tenet of optimal health that isn't discussed these days. Not at all. Very little. Optimal health is not about avoiding every little cold, every little issue, and keeping yourself in some little self-contained bubble. That's not really what optimal health's about. Optimal health is about being resilient enough to quickly bounce back whenever you do encounter a foreign invader, whenever you do encounter an uncomfortable situation, an unfamiliar situation, an unforeseen situation, whenever that does happen, because you're out living life, you're out adventuring. Sometimes things happen, but your ability to bounce back quicker than the typical average person, that is what having and possessing optimal health is about. So lastly, also, muscle is going to help with your metabolism. Muscle is going to help improve your insulin sensitivity, which helps overall metabolic health. So make weight training the center of your fitness regimen, and focus also, lastly, I have to mention this, to focus on lean body mass as a key metric as opposed to just your weight. Focus on lean body mass. So for the last area, overlooking the gut and oral microbiome. Now, I will admit, I'll be the first one to raise my hand here, that I'm a little guilty of this myself. And this is an area that I can still use improvement on. And this is an area that I tend to overlook unless I actually have something that shows up. So, but the rate at which you age, the rate and the ability to fight off various infections, your weight, your mood, your productivity, your heart health, your brain health, your metabolic health are all influenced by your gut. We actually have a second brain down there. And oral health is also highly connected with our health and cardiovascular health, big time. And, speaking of oral, you have chronic bad breath, or you can have oral thrush, or you can have inflamed gums. These can all be a sign of bigger issues. Now, and oral health can also influence gut health. So this is just another reason amongst the hundreds of why it's important to look at your health through the lens of a system. So different levels of bacteria, different imbalances of these microbes, they can lead to a host of issues and inconveniences that can impede your health and performance. So as you're going to continually build up your longevity toolkit throughout the years, throughout the months, don't forget to look into your oral and your gut health. So now, as we land this ship, a quick recap of these 8 areas are: number 1, not understanding or knowing your unique biology, not knowing your true age for the second one. Number 3 is to not identify, or you're just ignoring potential red flags out there. Number 4 is inconsistent and or incomplete blood work. And the next one is to have no system or structure of monitoring your health. So don't be left in the dark. Monitor it, track it. The next one is to operate with a "that's normal" mentality, in quotations, instead of asking and seeking what's optimal when it comes to your health, when it comes to your blood work. The next one is to not prioritize resistance training. Muscle is your greatest longevity currency. Lastly is to don't overlook gut and oral microbiome. So with all that said, thank you once again for tuning in. Any questions, or if you're interested in getting a bespoke and precise health and longevity plan designed specifically for you, then reach out at Julian at executivehealth.io. And until next time, stay awesome, be limitless, and go be the CEO of your health and your life. Peace.